Hello and welcome to another podcast with YourLocalNote.com. I'm RJ, Mike Stringer also hanging with us, and we've got Carl Bahner in the studio. Carl Bahner and Friends we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about his studio, Springhouse Sound, and we got a whole bunch of stuff coming up here. It's a little bit different than what we normally do as far as featuring one artist at a time. We've got a couple that we're going to be talking about, and we're going to be talking about his studio again at Springhouse Sound Studios. So that's coming up in just minutes, because we're going to kick it off with one of his songs, and then we'll talk to him about his music and his studio. Remember, you can always sign up for our weekly newsletter. Just contact us at contact@yourlocalnote.com. We stream 24/7. We got free apps. Download them absolutely free. Just go to the respective stores and type in YLN. So let's get this started with Carl Bahner and Friends, Cherries on Top, on YourLocalNote.com.
Trace of what once was, not even a gosh damn sound. I'm counting backwards until the clock is ticking again. We're gonna set the world on fire, pushing up with no doubt on what it's fussing about. I've become nothing. Why so many find the ways to believe them all and fake the truth? Future brings us all, we'll pick up and place upon us with cherries on top.
The song is called Cherries on Top from the album Carl Bahner and Friends, and we've got Carl and one of his friends with us
one
tonight.
One of my very few friends. This is Ed Myers, longtime friend, I guess. We've been buds for, 10 years now?
Yeah, almost too long.
Okay.
No, I'm just kidding.
Very good. Carl, welcome back. We've had you in before, and of course, we've worked with you in the past. Always enjoy that, and we're happy to have you in to talk about your music. You got a new album coming out. Mm-hmm. The song we heard is Cherries on Top. Tell us about that song.
Cherries on Top was actually a song that one of my bands wrote, 4 years ago, maybe?
One of your many hundreds of bands
one of
that
the,
you participated
many projects.
in.
It was a group called The Minimalist. with two good friends of mine, Joseph Calloway and Eric Malmgren Samuel. And the band split up before we ever got a chance to release anything.
Okay.
Now, with that particular band, when we would perform live, we had just miles of cables because we had a lot of electronics, a lot of backing tracks as well. And then there's me just playing my fully acoustic drum set. You know, I had to be the oddball sticking out. But because we had to use all these backing tracks for the shows, we had a lot of the stuff recorded, and we had it recorded pretty well, but we never finished, recording real drum tracks because I played them live, so we didn't need them.
Right.
So when I started putting together, my ideas for the Carl Bahner and Friends record, I wanted to revive two songs from the Minimalist, from the band that I was in.
Okay.
Because otherwise they'd never see the light of day, and they were some of my favorite songs I'd ever been a part of.
Okay.
So tracked down all of the original parts, tweaked some things, replaced some things, and then recorded a whole bunch of new, live drum parts and some tack piano and a couple little things.
Some of it is an older recording.
Yeah, so like the vocals we actually recorded, I guess 4 years ago.
Really?
Same with some of the synth parts and like the electronic drums, but then all of, I guess the rest of it we did.
Did you have to get permission from the other members of the band?
Yep, and they were totally cool with it because they were just excited as I was, just that they would finally see, daylight and be heard, because they're really great songs in my opinion.
So who wrote this song? Cherries on
this
Top?
one was written by Joseph Joseph Calloway.
Okay.
So he's awesome. He's one of my groomsmen in my wedding. Good friend of mine. And he has a new project out called Lustinger, so you should check them out.
Sure.
I don't know if they have any new recordings yet, but he has a couple demos out on Facebook.
Okay. Very good. Very good. So what other song did you bring back from the Minimalists?
There's one called Weights at My Feet, which will also be on here. And that one is, I don't know, Ed, you mixed it, so how would you describe Weights on My Feet?
It's got kind of a similar vibe to Cherries on Top, but I don't know, it's a little bit more laid back. I don't know, I kind of like it. It's a little, I don't really know how to classify it. It's all the songs, we did these like a marathon mixing over the course of, what is it? It's been like several weeks.
Yeah.
Almost. We've been a marathon mixing, just every single night.
Right.
From
like 7 till 2 a.m.
Wow.
So at this point, they're all kind of running together for me.
Okay.
And the album is so eclectic. The styles go from Weights at My Feet and Cherries on Top to very experimental tracks, which you mentioned a little bit earlier.
Yeah, what were we talking before we got on?
I don't want to spoil it.
Well, we can talk about it now since you brought it up.
Yeah, some really experimental tracks, some acoustic things that Carl did with some of his buddies. And so it was really fun to mix, but at this point, all of them kind of are this big mix for me of just different styles and different sounds. So
Carl, I guess then, since he's talked about the different styles, and the one song that stood out to me, what was that again? That was
Double Slit.
Double Slit, yes.
Yeah.
And it's eclectic is a good word.
Frightening is a better word.
I had nightmares mixing it.
When you're putting this album together, what is your thoughts? Because I guess because your background, because you've played with so many different bands, you are very easy to go from different styles.
Yeah, I mean, I love it. I mean, I love being challenged to go between different styles of music,
So how
rapidly.
did you pick these songs out then? What was the process?
Well, the process wasn't necessarily... It wasn't... How do I say this? I didn't intend for it specifically to be eclectic. I knew it would be, because the intention was actually to just get as many of my great musician friends to collaborate with me.
How many played?
Oh gosh, I don't know the exact number. I think close to 30.
Okay.
Close to probably like 25 or 25 or 30 different musicians.
And how long did it take you to put this together?
2 years.
Okay.
Because
scheduling,
and they're all great musicians, so they're all busy. So they're all touring, they're all teaching,
right?
And then I have no free time ever. So the fact, trying to find a time where I am available and they're available.
It's a roll of the
quite
dice.
difficult. And and specifically, the one tune we were talking about a minute ago, Double Slit, features Marcus Reuter, who is a phenomenal guitar player, but he's based out of, I think, Germany now, but I think he was living in Austria at the time.
Okay.
So, not everybody, we're local Philly guys. I mean, I had people from Europe sending me tracks. So, and he's in the Crimson Project, which is with all the King Crimson guys.
Right.
So he's, touring all over the world all the time. So I had to, wait until he was available. Eric Slick from Dr. Dog did some tracks, but, he's in Dr. Dog, so they're touring constantly.
Sure.
So finally we were able to get some tracks done, and I have everything tracked that needs to be tracked, and I'm so happy. It's been 2 years. Oh my gosh. Oh, been a long process.
Okay. How do you go out and promote this album? I mean, obviously what you're doing tonight is a part of the promotion, but usually then a band goes out and plays. But you've now got 30 different musicians. You're not going to be able to get them all together to go out
unless
and
I win the
tour.
lottery.
Yes.
Well,
so what's your approach then?
Well, my approach honestly is kind of twofold. The original intent was not only for me to learn and grow, as a musician, and as a producer too, like kind of wrangling all of these wayfaring musician types. But I just lost my thought. Delete this part. Blah, 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 blah. But what I wanted to do was, have some new music that I could use for like TV and film. So taking, writing these songs, but then having like the instrumental versions be available and try to push them to get them into like a car commercial or into, different ads like that. So that way it's not completely just frivolous. Like I can actually use it. Now I can't put a band together and go tour on these things. I could probably do it for a couple tunes, but at least this way, if I had the goal be more towards, like licensing, then I think it actually makes sense. And the diversity actually helps me with that too.
Right. And it took you said it took you 2 years because of scheduling, and you have Springhouse Sound, which how much of Carl Bahner and Friends was actually recorded at Springhouse Sound?
I think probably about 2/3 of it.
Okay.
Because like I said before, some of the stuff was recorded years ago. Some of the stuff was recorded in, Europe, for example, so a good chunk of it was done here. But, really depending on where the musicians were from, what their timing was. Some of the stuff we recorded before we opened the studio. So we did some stuff at Julie Stick's studio in Philly before she moved out to LA. It's crazy. Everybody's crazy. I don't know how we do it.
So how would you say having your own studio impacted this final product of Carl Bahner and Friends?
Well, it probably made it take even longer.
See, you would think it would be easier because
it's not easier.
You could have your own studio at any time of the day.
Exactly. So then all those little nitpicky things that normally you're like, okay, I can't afford the studio anymore, I'll deal with it.
Right.
I don't have to deal with it.
You could change too much.
Yeah, you could. And it was tricky because I felt like in the beginning of, working on these tunes, at the new studio, I felt the desire to go back and really, get picky and fine tune it. But in the end, when I would go back to some of the songs, I would realize, no, these are perfect. I'm really happy with them. I don't want to mess anything up.
Right. Good. So we're going to start playing musicians that recorded at Springhouse Sound.
Yeah.
Throughout this podcast. So the first one we're going to go to is Sean Hoots and their song Dry Bones. It's the Sean Hoots Trio. Just tell us a little bit about them and about the recording process with them for Dry Bones.
Oh, okay. Well, Sean Hoots is from Hoots and Hellmouth. That's how most people know him. And the trio is actually Sean playing guitar, Todd Irk, who is the bass player from Hoots and Hellmouth, also playing bass, and then I was playing drums.
Right.
And we recorded this at a live concert that we had at the studio. So as far as the recording goes, we should ask my man Ed here, because he was the poor soul that had to deal with all of us. I got to just, play drums and have fun.
Yeah, it's really a fun challenge to try to record bands in kind of a live concert / studio environment, because what we do is we set up these small shows. We have about 15 to 20 audience members, and then the band in the studio performing just like they would anywhere else.
Right.
Now, our space isn't the largest space ever, so it's kind of a, would you say that's pretty accurate?
That's pretty accurate. It's not a
it's
cathedral.
beautiful sounding, but it's a small, intimate space. And part of the challenge of that is getting microphones into the right positions to get great sounds without taking away from the musician's performance and getting in their way. We've also done video for most of these concerts too. So in addition to the microphones, getting cameras into good positions to, get video quality.
Right.
So, recording, get bleed between microphones, we find we have to embrace the bleed. It's like the old days, you get a whole bunch of live microphones in a room and you're getting the real performance.
Yeah.
You don't get, the super produced, over punched in where you record, most bands today, and this is kind of changing back to the old days, but most bands today will record drum tracks first, then they'll record bass tracks on top of that, then guitar tracks on top of that.
Well, they'll record drum tracks and then they'll edit the crap out of them.
Yeah, lots of editing.
Get that perfect
We don't
measure
have that
or
luxury.
perfect 2 measures and then just repeat.
Yeah, we don't have that luxury, but at the same time, you get a really honest sounding performance and you get a lot more energy. So you'll notice in these songs, there's some, looseness to them, but it's also got like a lot of heart to it, and they just sound great, and I really love it. So
Let's get to the second song now. It's Sean Hoots Trio. We're talking with Carl Bahner and Ed Myers of Springhouse Sound, and this is the Sean Hoots Trio and their song Dry Bones on yourlocalnote.com.
Dry bone. Need your attention. Dry bone. Need your time and affection. Dry bones, dry bones, all alone, all alone. Flesh melt away, bones turn to rot. Oh, my veins run dry, my nerves have been shot. All I know is I'm just a pile of dry bones, dry bones, dry. Dry bone. Need your caressing. Dry transgressing. Oh, trouble, just a little pile alone, pile alone, pile alone. Oh, I said, muscle fell weight, bones turn to right. Oh, my veins run dry, and all my nerves have been shot. Oh, I know I'm just a pile, drive home, drive home. Trombone, trombone, trombone. Trouble.
That is the Sean Hoots Trio with their song Dry Bones on yourlocalnote.com. We're here with Carl and Ed to talk about Springhouse Sound and the recording, as well as Carl's latest release, Carl Bahner and Friends. We were talking about the recording process with this live performance in Springhouse. How does the chaos of a live performance and knowing that you have to get the perfect sound for a recording play into you personally, Ed, when this is all going down? Talk about the stress of it all, trying to know that you have to get it perfect, and then how that has gotten easier for you because you're doing these performances over and over. You haven't done just one or two. You're constantly doing these performances at Springhouse.
Right. Well, we do a lot of some prepping beforehand. We do have sound checks and things like that. But yeah, blood pressure is definitely running high during the shows, watching the meters, making sure things don't go into the red too much. The interesting thing about live shows is we often do 2 sets at our shows. And the first set will generally be pretty conservative. We'll have good levels all the way through. I'm looking at our intern and being like, yeah, this is great. Second set, everybody's full of energy. The first one's out of the way, They're comfortable, and the band starts playing out more. So you really get more energy. The meters start peaking up a little bit higher. You got to kind of ride things and keep things under control. But it makes it really fun. You can't just sit back. You're actually, as an engineer, a living part of the performance. Right. Trying to make sure everything stays mixed the way it's supposed to live. And then, we do go back and tweak things after the fact, but, the performance is really where it's at for us.
Yeah, there's really not much you can do to fix it, because in a live situation like that, you can't just replace a botched guitar note, because that guitar note is getting picked up in like 8 different microphones because it's all in one room. But I did want to mention too, what I think helps in the end is, like Ed said, we do 2 sets usually, and we do 2 identical sets, or mostly identical sets. So we have 2 separate sets of audiences for the shows.
Okay.
That's kind of how we can get around only being able to fit 15 people in the room.
Right.
So what's nice for us is it gives us a chance to really make sure we have some good takes, but for the band, they can do their more conservative set, and if they want to be a little weirder in the second set, they can.
Are they playing the same songs, or are they playing? Okay,
usually the same song. So that way, they actually have 2 versions of each song, essentially 2 takes of each song to pick from. When they're seeing if they want to release any of it, or even if we just want to put it up on YouTube, they have the option. They're not just stuck with the one set.
Talk about bringing the audience in, and also you've streamed some of these shows on the web. Just talk about how people listening to the podcast can get involved, show up to one of these shows in the future.
It's a lot of fun. I love it, whether I'm playing, during them, or I'm just there as a spectator myself. Like I love it. So if you want to come to any of the events, we do all of our reservations, online. Yeah, just go to the Facebook page. We have
Facebook.com/Springhouse Sound.
And we have the most updated information there.
Okay, and then they can figure out from there. Contact you and get you there. All right, Carl, let's talk about your approach when you're drumming with the band as you're recording, and then as a producer. I mean, can you separate, or as you are drumming, are you thinking, are you thinking also as a producer as things are going along? I
would say up until the first note is played, I am a wreck. And I am nervous about what I'm going to do, making sure that everybody that's coming, nobody got lost on the way.
Right.
Making sure that all the musicians are happy, making sure that all the mics are set, making sure that, my intern's happy, which, you should do.
No, you really shouldn't worry about the intern.
Well, yeah. Well, Jack,
we worry about everybody.
Jack's an exception. But usually whenever I'm playing, I always make sure that I have somebody else there.
So, Ed, how is it dealing with Carl as he's going through these
I'll put on my
episodes?
It's really not so bad dealing with Carl. It's just everything else. There's a lot of moving parts. Like I said, our space isn't huge, so we've got people moving in and out constantly while we're setting up the session and trying to get sounds while the band is simultaneously warming up for their performance. Trying to get their songs ready to go. Sound check is kind of a wild ride.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's exciting. We've had great success with it. I wouldn't say that we have a perfect procedure, and it's definitely a roller coaster ride.
Yeah.
Well, you've got musicians you're dealing with.
Yeah.
So that's always going to be an adventure because they're all different.
Yeah. We've had everything from like Marcus Reuter, who is just solo electric guitar through a lot of effects. Then we had Toy Soldiers, who a 5-piece band. So we had drums, electric guitar, acoustic guitar, which is really difficult to do in a live situation. Keyboards, live piano, and whatever else I missed. Bass. Did I say bass? Yeah. So we have, 5 people in the room, and RJ, you've been to the room, so it's, like Ed said, it's not huge. We have 5-person band playing, plus 15 to 20 people in the audience. So even if everything was going smoothly, we always have that little fear in the back of our minds that something's going to go wrong.
And the pressure's also on because you have a live audience. Because you can't have a meltdown.
And you can't just start over.
Right, because they're expecting a show.
Yeah.
So now between sets, because you talked about how you do it twice. Now between sets, are you then playing producer, or do you just let Ed deal with that when you're playing on the drums?
Usually between sets, I go into hardcore schmoozing mode. Where I'm making sure all the clients are happy, show them where the bathroom is, make sure they get some cookies, thank them all for coming out, doing all that.
Musician,
doing the host,
salesman, MC.
Yep.
Does it all, doesn't he, Ed?
He does.
Okay. Let's talk about the third song. You mentioned Toy Soldiers. We're going to do Red Dress. This was recorded at Springhouse Sound.
Yep. This was at our very first concert.
Another live show. Okay. Very cool. Tell us about it, how that went.
Awesome. Okay. I mean, it was, if I'm a wreck before a show, I was quadruple wreck before that one because it was our very first one. And I didn't know what I was getting myself into. We went for it, and the end result, I think we nailed it. And I very rarely say that about myself, but I really feel like because that show went so well, that's what gave us the confidence to keep going and doing more concerts and more live recordings, because it just everything that could have went right, and that very rarely happens in the industry.
Did you know as the show was going that things were going well, or was it after everything was settled and you listened back to it, you were like, okay, this turned out the way I wanted to turn out?
I think it was more so after the fact. Because at that point, like during the actual show, I had nothing to compare it to.
Got it.
Because I was, everything sounded great, and I knew that, the band sounded great, but I wasn't listening to the recording. I wasn't, the random audience member who was never there before and, experiencing this whole thing for the first time. But then after the set was over and after talking to everybody in the audience, it seemed like the band had fantastic time. Everybody in the audience had a great time.
That's good.
I was still a little shaky and nervous until everybody left, but I had a good time too.
Very cool.
I think.
All right. The song is called Red Dress. It's by Toy Soldiers. It was recorded at Springhouse Sound Studios, and we're talking with Carl Bahner and Ed Myers from Springhouse Sound Studio right here on yourlocalnote.com.
I got this red dress waiting for you. I got this red dress waiting for you. You gotta put it on so I can take it off. You gotta get it soon so I can get across. Got this big heart waiting for you. I got this big heart waiting for you. I got this big heart waiting for you. Well, there's more than enough to go around, but only to you this heart is mine. I got this big heart waiting for you. Oh, my love, I got all this waiting. All you gotta do is come take it right from me. I got this nice bed made up just for you. I got this nice bed made up just for you. To rest your soul and sleep in head, or to jump around on it instead. I got this nice life I wanna share with you. I've got this nice life I wanna share with you. I've got this nice life I wanna share with you. You're the one. No, you're the one. And one makes 11. I got this nice life I wanna share with you. All right. Oh, my love, I got all this waiting. All you gotta do is come take it. Oh, my dear, I got so much waiting. All you gotta do is come take it right from.
Carl, give me a number, please. 6. Carl, another one.
Mathematics joke. Take it right.
All right, that's Toy Soldiers. The song is called Red Dress, and they recorded that at Springhouse Sound Studio, located in King of Prussia. We're hanging out with Carl Bahner and Ed Myers from Springhouse Sound. And, of course, Carl has a new album out, Carl Bahner and Friends. That's another reason we have him in here. But he's also a studio magician, just putting things together. Let's talk about some of the things that you have going on at the studio, at Springhouse Sound Studio, for kids.
Well, we're actually talking right now about setting up another camp for students, another recording camp.
Okay.
We did one this summer. It was our first one, and it completely blew me away. It was more fun and more productive than I ever thought it was going to be.
What goes on at this music camp?
Well, at this camp, we had 5 students that were ages, I think, 15 to 18. And we gave them a pretty hard crash course into recording on the first 3 days. It was a 5-day camp. And we did everything from, kind of your standard basic recording techniques to a lot of experimental techniques, and let them have a lot of fun with that. Because I have a lot of instruments. I think that's safe to say that we have a lot of stuff at the studio. So we let them just go at it, and I'd say, here's this auto harp. How do you think we should record it? And use what you've learned so far, and what you've experimented with, and let's see if we can find ways to record it. And then by trial and error, they would see what sounds good and what sounds like crap. And that's. It worked for me, so
okay.
It seems like it worked for them
too.
too.
And the kids liked it too.
So from Monday to Wednesday, we learn some recording techniques, and then Thursday and Friday we had a real band come in. So I play with John and Brittany, so I had John and Brittany come in to record a song. So that Thursday we did drum parts, and we did I think we ended up recording 3 drum set parts, plus a bunch of percussion that were all kind of like overlapped on top of each other. That Thursday. And then Friday we did bass, the guitars, piano, ukulele, and vocals. And I think I'm missing something, but yeah,
many parts.
A lot of stuff. Okay. So, and these kids were champs, and they set up everything. They did all of the engineering, all of the mixing too. So they basically, from start to finish, they did an entire song, and they had 3 days of education, and then boom, trial by fire.
Exactly.
So I thought it was, all the kids had a great time. All the parents were happy, which is always a plus. But, for me, I teach, every day of the week. Like I have 40 students right now. So teaching something new, but teaching something like that and seeing how fulfilled the kids was so rewarding, and I can't wait till we can do it again.
Right, and John and Brittany, they're great. So they're the final product. I'm sure did you have the kids listen to John and Brittany before they came in? So,
yeah.
I'm sure they were fans right away and realized who they were dealing with, great musicians. And how did John and Brittany deal with the students and working with them?
They're awesome. They're like the most relaxed people I think I've ever met. So they were great with it, and it was cool too because this particular song was not at all like the typical John and Brittany repertoire. Like it was more like Tom Waitsy. Okay. So a lot of distorted drums and ukulele. So
right.
not your typical rock song.
Yeah.
So they had a lot of fun getting to experiment, which they haven't done in that format before. And the kids, of course, had a blast because they got to be weird and stomp around and yell and all the fun things that kids get to do.
Right. So before we wrap up, let's just go through all the things and try to keep up with you, Carl, because you're doing a million things at once. Springhouse Sound. Talk about again the show you have coming up at the end of October. October
25th is our next show, and we have Trevor Gordon Hall coming in, and he is a phenomenal acoustic guitar player. He has I think it's a 2-octave kalimba that he has attached to his guitar. So he does tapping with one hand and does counter melodies on a kalimba with the other, and it's ridiculous and crazy. So
is that going to be open to just a studio audience, or is that going to be
We might do like a last minute webcast.
Okay.
But we might decide to do a webcast last minute if we sell out. But I think the plan is just to have a live audience.
Okay. And what's your website? How can we tell people to get tickets to that studio audience?
Easiest way is just go to our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/Springhouse Sound.
Okay. And your album, which the first song you heard tonight, Cherries on Top, is from Carl Bahner and Friends. It's a 2-year project that I believe the last time you were in here, we were talking about you getting ready to start that, to embark on that.
It might have been one of the first times I was ever here was to promote the Kickstarter.
Right.
That I did and was successful.
Very successful, yeah.
And was what funded this project.
Excellent. And so that came out on October 1st, the beginning of this month. And just tell us what site they can go to purchase the album.
Go to springhousesound.bandcamp.com and you can get the Carl Bahner and Friends CD there, but also you can listen to some of the other projects. So some of the songs that you've heard tonight, they're all posted on there, as well as some of the other songs from those sets. So if you want to hear more Toy Soldiers live or more Sean Hoots Trio stuff, you can come check it out.
Okay, Ed, before we wrap up, thanks so much for coming in and talking to us about Springhouse. Synopsis on your experience with Carl and Springhouse, and also what we can expect to hear from the studio.
Well, my experience so far with Carl has been really, really positive. I've worked with a lot of studios in the past, and I've never had quite the chemistry, I guess, as I have with Carl from a producer standpoint. He's really creative and experimental, as am I. And we're kind of using a really traditional approach to recording, leaning towards live. So you look forward to hearing a lot of really gritty, fun, natural sounding tracks with a lot of heart to them coming out of the studio in the coming months and years. Excellent. Guys, thanks so much for coming back.
Thanks for having us.
No problem. We're wrapping things up with John and Brittany's track, Delacroix Blues, recorded at Springhouse Sound. Don't forget, we're going to have another featured podcast next week. Check out the concert calendar as well. If you want to get our newsletter weekly, just send us an email, contact@yourlocalnote.com. And don't forget, stream YLN Radio. Just download the apps YLN at the Apple Store, Android Store, Google Play. Okay, we're going to wrap things up. The last song we're going to hear is from John and Brittany. It's Delacroix Blues, again, recorded by the Campers at Springhouse Sound with Carl over a 5-day learning experience with those kids. And before we wrap up, let me just remind you to download our free iPhone and Android app at their stores. Just search YLN. And you can get for free YLN Radio, streaming 24/7 all these bands and artists you're hearing at yourlocalnote.com. So again, John and Brittany, Delacroix Blues. We've been talking with Carl Bahner and Ed Myers from Springhouse Sound. Go to springhousesound.bandcamp.com and get Carl Bahner and Friends. Download that right now. All right, we're ending it with John and Brittany, Delacroix Blues, recorded at Springhouse Sound here on yourlocalnote.com.